Let's talk about spinal cord injuries, shall we?
This is so dumb. Why is my couch like super low right here?
If you want to subscribe to my Patreon so I can probably get a new couch, that'd be great.
Hey Starlings, I actually just realized when I was setting up my tripod that I don't actually say my full name on here. It's LolitaMilena, and I think that's also probably why a lot of people don't really know how to pronounce Milena. So now you know. A small break, it's been a minute. But I made this video in a shorter format over on TikTok, and I decided I wanted to be able to elaborate a little bit more here on YouTube about this topic. Spinal cord injuries, duh, but it's also discussing spinal cord fusions. Like I said over on TikTok, whenever I tell people, yeah, I have a spinal fusion and I have titanium in my spinal cord, a lot of people seem to think that makes me a bionic woman, something like the Terminator, or they just removed my entire spine and just replaced it with a hunk of metal. So instead of just giving you the clip notes like I did over on TikTok, I will actually break it down piece by piece exactly what that all means and hear me yap, aka doing my job. Let's begin. First things first, my entire spinal cord, it's not a chunk of metal. I'm not the T-1000, unfortunately. That'd be really, really cool. And I can also kind of see where people are coming from considering my posture. I don't have a full titanium spinal cord. Those of you who may be new here, I was injured in active child abuse when I was 2 years old in the American foster care system. I'm also a first-generation immigrant. And after that, I was rushed to emergency surgery, obviously, where they had to try and find a way to keep the spinal cord intact, because right now it was like this. And back in 2002, they just kind of put rods and screws and kind of just hope for the best. Okay, I'm back. How you doing? Now, the thing that the surgeon had said during the court case in terms to my injury was the violence was way it happened with physics would be if you took a stick and held it like this and then snapped it over your knee. That's how he described it in the court documents that I have. A spinal fusion right off the bat. I got the rods and the screws. That was pretty common back then. I have an older sister who was paralyzed even younger than me. We're not biologically related. She also had rods and screws, and to my knowledge, I don't think she ever had a spinal fusion done. For me, I had the rods and screws, and they had told my parents it's going to be probably 3 to 5 years until she's going to need a fusion. And we have to try and keep any scoliosis that may occur at bay, or else the fusion is going to have to be moved up further or lower than where my injury was. My initial injury was at T12. And if you have scoliosis or develop scoliosis after a spinal cord injury, you have to get those pieces fused or else it's just going to get worse. My parents, mainly my mother, helmed push off spinal fusion as long as possible. And that resulted in me wearing a hard shell back brace for 10 years, from the ages of 2 to 12, 13-ish when I got the spinal fusion. And that was 23 hours a day, 7 days a week. I grew up in the Midwest, where there was not a lot of wind and there was a lot of humidity in the summertime. But, you know, there's only so much you could do. I also had walking braces. I did talk about that a lot more over on my TikTok channel. I did make a little video over on my TikTok about the stander, and I found out they don't even make those anymore. It's such a good invention. But I used those walking braces 6 to 8 hours a day, 7 days a week, with a 1 10-minute break during those 6 to 8 hours. I wore them to church. I wore them to school. I wore them to outings. I wore them to shopping trips with my family. We did everything. My parents made sure that I stayed on top of this routine to hold off the curve of my spine, to make it a game. My parents tried to make it a fun game and not something that is very scary for a child. Whenever we'd have to go see my orthopedic doctor, we would always try and guess what the curvature of my spine was, because they had told my parents if it gets to 50 or close to 50, it's spinal fusion time. And my father was heavily documenting every doctor visit, every orthotics visit, everything that was going on in my life, he documented it. And we would always make a game of guessing the number, and whoever I think got closer to the number that the doctor told us got like a little dessert, because we'd go out to eat to just a random restaurant. And these weren't frequent visits. Remember, I was probably about 6 or 7, and we had guessed the number was going to be 26. I guessed 26. My mom guessed, I think, 29 or 30. And we went in, and the doctor had said it had gone down because I think the number was 24 or 25 at the time. And he told us it was at 20. So we all got dessert that day. But unfortunately, things were progressing really fast around the age of, I want to say it was close to 11 years old. Got to November of that had to be probably 2012. I did that because my father had passed away in 2012 and I got my fusion in 2013. That was in like January of 2013. It had gotten to like 46, 47. The whole family was just coming off of losing our father, grandfather, husband. And then my mother had to learn how to manage all the house finances. We lost probably some of the best family insurance we ever had with my father's job. So we lost all of that, and none of us really knew what to do. He handled so much, and being told I had to get the fusion done. And my mother had always expected that he'd be around, and he also expected that he'd be around. I definitely expected my father, who was my rock as a child, to be there for me in this thing, because as I got older, I realized just how drastic spinal fusion was, especially a solid spinal fusion. Unfortunately, that's not the way the cookie crumbled, and I went into my spinal fusion in 2013. I have a titanium spinal cord. That's not entirely accurate. If you saw from where my scar is, I no longer have mobility twisting sensations from I want to say just middle part of my shoulders all the way down. And that was the first thing my surgeon had told me when we were being prepared for all this, the fall of 2012, that I would lose essentially all mobility. It looks like I lean to one side. It's because my hip's out of socket. We're not going to talk about that. But I went into the surgery. The surgery lasted about 6 to 8 hours. I'm very foggy on the exact number, but I do remember for sure. They said that 10 minutes was actually putting all the hardware into my spinal cord. The rest of the surgery was just putting everything back where it belonged. I also want to say that was the surgery that no one told me that I should close my eyes when they're putting the medication through your IV. I, for some reason, kept my eyes open. Scariest situation I think I've ever experienced, and I don't recommend anyone do that. Easily say, I think it's the closest simulation you'll ever feel to passing away, because it's one by one your senses go. And I think my first sensation was touch. I went totally numb all over the place, which, already being paralyzed, that's not a fun feeling. I think the next thing to go was my ability to speak, because they were talking to me and they were telling me to count backwards from 20. I couldn't feel my tongue anymore. I didn't like that. And then my vision was to go. That was the scariest. I think movies from now on, if they're going to try and depict the act of passing away through someone's point of view, it's not so much you just see lights and everything fades to white. It's more like everything turns into pixels, and you can see every pixel like a screen of what makes up our reality, is what I saw. And then the lights start. So the most common is bone grafting, where basically they just fuse bone on bone with the vertebrae. Another would be using titanium plates, and then you cage it in with screws, pins, other rods, if you will. And then there is, I called it hybrid fusing of metal, usually titanium. It's pretty much the go-to. And then you fuse the bone to the titanium. So from here, I want to say, actually, where's my scar? Single vertebrae, every plate has titanium locked inside of it. Actually, kind of how my scar is so thin. It's because it's just my own flesh, just kind of safety taped it down. So the healing process, let's talk about the healing process. They tell you it will be very painful and the healing will feel like it's taking forever. It's actually kind of the opposite. You heal faster than they tell you, but it's gonna hurt more than they tell you. When I first came to and the painkillers were pretty much wearing off at that point, the first thing I felt was like an electrocution, as if someone hooked every piece of me to a live wire and it was just running up and down my spinal cord like a power circuit. It was just pew, 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 like a ping pong. To this day, I still get some nerves that kind of pulsate, and it's that little electric feeling. The worst part is when it gets caught behind my shoulder blades, or the muscles in front of the shoulder blades, I'd say, where it feels like the shoulder blade got caught on a muscle, and then it's just really freaking out the nerves. I'll say, this was an anomaly that none of my surgeons, none of my doctors, or my family members, or me, ever expected to happen. When I came to from surgery, the first thing I did was I looked at my mother. I said, I need to pee. And you might be thinking, why are we talking about this, Lolita? For 10 years, I have not been able to feel my bladder at all because the injury was above where that sensation should be. And my mother knew that, and she was very confused, and she thought I was still high on drugs. And I told her, no, like, I need to go to the bathroom. And it turns out not all of my nerves were dead. When the scoliosis was affecting essentially my entire spinal cord, it was kinking some nerves around where my injury was. And when the spinal fusion happened, it straightened out the spine. It actually saved those nerves. And now I can feel, I would say, down to like, where's my sensation end? Like here. No, let me tell you just offhand what I actually said when I first came to from my spinal fusion, because it's really, really sad. Came to, and this is coming from my mother. The nurse had come out to tell her that I was awake. The nurse had said something about, well, yeah, she told me that she had already seen her dad. He left the room for a bit, but he'll be coming back, so you can go in and see her, because I think it was one person at a time. And my mother stood there dumbfounded and had to explain to the nurse that her husband had died months before. Ketamine one hell of a drug. I can easily say having a spinal fusion improved my life, my quality of life, immensely. The nerve pain is usually only triggered by cold weather. It was really funny when I was getting this chair fitted to me, and the doctor telling me that I still had scoliosis, even though I'm like 97% metal at this point. And to wrap it up, not every spinal cord injury is going to require a spinal fusion as drastic as mine. They are not going to have a total spinal fusion like I did. And usually the protocol nowadays, they will have it fused then and there in the surgery, on the operating table. They will have that area fused now. I've been hearing from friends that I make here in Los Angeles when they tell me their stories, and when they had to go to the hospital, obviously, to address their broken spinal cords, they get that area fused. And then it's essentially just kind of up to them and their physical therapists or their trainers, doctors, to keep any potential scoliosis at bay. But I hope you learned something good after mine being a month away from this platform. I'm sorry. But with all that being said, thank you so much for watching this video. If you ever have any comments, questions, concerns about me, life, wheelchair life, not wheelchair life, what have you, please leave in the comments below. I do read them. I also have a Patreon. It's a smaller community, but I also will upload at least one video a month that is only for Patreon, or I will post sneak peeks, photos. I have chat areas over there. We are having a lot of fun over there. And I also have coupon codes in the description box to save you money. You can tell I haven't done this outro in a long time. My website, and oh, do I? I don't think my website's on there. I have a website, by the way. It's just my name, lolitaminii.com. You can also find the links to my books down there. I am also an author. So with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you all later.